You were, I think you said it already, I might have missed it, playing bass by the time you were visiting your father? Or was it still guitar at that time?
It was still guitar.
It was still guitar.
It was still guitar at the time.
Had there been any other Latin influences in the music that you were hearing before then? I mean, it came to you in a strong way at that time, but I mean, before then, were you hearing much Latin influence around you or in what you were playing either?
No, not at all. When I was playing guitar, I was going to Holy Cross at the time, and I was hanging out with a couple guys where I was living in Village Square, and like me, they were total metalheads. So, for us, it was all about Priest and Maiden and Motley Crue, and so no, there was no Latin to be found at all.
Right.
It was strictly a metal thing.
Did you take anything with you from that encounter in Florida?
No.
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 Plainly said. Everybody's got a Herb Albert Tijuana Brass Band record somewhere. They're in every bin. They're in everyone's house. They just made it out to the four corners of the earth some kind of a way. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if some of it stuck with you.
A couple of the tunes did. I don't know the names of songs, but if I heard them and if I heard the trumpet melody, I would know what it is. It would instantly take me back.
Sure.
To being young, and I'd be like, "Oh man, I remember that song." Yeah, that's because my dad was into that kind of music. So
the lady's name escapes me, but she's a volunteer DJ on WWOZ, Hispanic lady, and she plays nothing but Spanish music for her time on the show, and I jam out to it, dude. I like it. I love that stuff. I think it's so cool. It's different than whatever you're gonna find. I mean, maybe in other parts of the United States that's more prevalent, but here, that's my go-to for that. So I mean, and it's definitely, it's different than anything else we're gonna be able to find. So it kind of, I don't know, it strikes me. I'll pause for a minute and I'll listen to a few tunes on there every time I hear it.
Yeah, it's well, for a while I was working with a fringe Latin band. They were called Vivaz. Later, Acoustic Swiftness. They later changed their name to Vivaz. And they still play around the city, and they would play a lot at the time. It was called Cafe Brazil on Frenchman.
Yeah.
And I would work the door for them, and just being around them and hanging out with the band leader, who I've known for years. I mean, that's all he had playing was Latin jazz and things like that. So, going and doing, helping them out at gigs, working the door, setting their gear up. I was constantly exposed to that. That's all they played.
That's cool.
So that's where a lot of the bulk of the Latin stuff came in, was hearing that stuff, the different styles, especially the salsa. And the percussion and everything. I'm like, man. And those bass lines too, man. They really, they're not the most difficult things, but I mean, it just really propels the music.
Sure.
In conjunction with the drums. It really pushes it. That kind of style, it's called a clave.
Yeah.
And it's 2 against 3 and 3 against 2, and it's a rhythmic type of form. And it really propels the music along with the drums and drives it. And being a bassist, of course, that always stuck with me. Like, man, it's just, a simple progression, but it's
powerful.
Yes, absolutely.
That's cool. What was when in your life did the first band occur? Is that something that's been recent? Has most of your experience been solo?
My first band was a band called, this was 2008 or 9, was a band called Vice, which were a few friends of mine. My friend Matt, he was a drummer, and he's like, hey, I'm doing this project. I want you in on it. And so that was my first band. Immediately after that, or right around the same time, I got with this band called Built to Destroy, which was a real total 180. Vice was like, well, kind of like alternative rock. Mm-hmm. Built to Destroy was just straight up heavy technical thrash. And so I got with them, doing stuff with them. And then right around the same time, maybe a year or two later, I joined the band called, at the time, called The Great Void. Then they just went to The Void. I played bass with them. And so that was about, 2000, between 2008 and I'd say 2010. And then sometime around 2000. Why did I get to cruises between 2000 and 2011? I think 2011, somewhere around that time, I got the Exhorder gig, which was what had happened was the bass player at the time, Frankie Sparcello, had passed, and I got a Facebook message from Kyle Thomas, and he's like, "Call Vinny LaBella ASAP," and it just went from there. But I think the way I got the gig, I'm convinced, was that the band Malevolent Creation from Florida, they were playing a show at a venue in Fat City at the time called The Bar, which used to be Ski Lodge.
Yeah.
And the promoter hit me up. It's like, "Hey, dude, we need an opening band. Can you guys do it? Built to Destroy." And so I hit up my guys. I'm like, "Dude, we're opening for Malevolent. Yeah, let's do it." So we did it, and Kyle and Vinny were there. And because Malevolent was on Roadrunner Records, as was Exhorder.
Yeah.
And they saw us play, and I think that was a catalyst. They were like, so I contacted Vinny. He's like, "Look, I know you have a couple show coming up, because The Void and Built to Destroy, I was going to be doing double duty. We were booked to play Siberia that night." And I told the guys, I said, "Look," I said, "Exhorder want me to do some shows with them in Texas with Rigor Mortis. So I'm taking the gig." And they weren't too crazy about it, but they understood. And then after we did a few shows there, then a month or two later, we did the Maryland Death Fest, where we co-headlined with Vivaz, which was kind of a dream come true, and to get to hang out with those guys. And then after that, I've pretty much just been low-key for the most part, with the exception of now I'm doing, for the last few months, I guess we started it around November or so, I've been doing the Mimic project with Apollo from Heracleon.
Mm-hmm.
So
you were, but you were also, you started the Grooves, didn't you? That was your band?
The Grooks, no. And thank you. I can't believe I forgot to mention. Shame on me. I actually volunteered to play bass for them, because the first time I saw them was at the Circle Bar. And they completely blew me away. They were so energetic. I was like, "Man, these guys are fantastic." And their drummer had left, and their bass player went to drums, and so they were just a two-piece. And I saw them play at Babylon one night, this club in Metairie, and I said, "Man, you guys really need a bass player." I said, "I'm not doing anything. I'd be more than happy to." And they're like, "Okay, well, we're playing Creepy Fest next week. Can you learn the tunes in a week?" I was like, "Yeah, just give me, a tape or some way to listen to them." And they sent me the files. I learned the tunes, and yeah, we did Creepy Fest, and then started playing shows with other local bands, and playing Creepy Fest every year. And so yeah, no, it wasn't my band. I volunteered to play bass for them because I liked what they did. They were real energetic, and that's another thing too. I kind of pride myself on, is that any band or project I've ever done has not sounded like anything remotely that's come out of New Orleans. I'm not saying that to disparage the New Orleans sound.
Sure.
But what I'm saying is bands like Built to Destroy, The Void, Vice, The Grooks, Mimic, my current project, none of those bands sounded anything like what was coming out the city. They all had their own unique sound. All the bands were different. And I pride myself on that, because it's hard, really, I think, to be in bands that can stand out and not be carbon copies of other bands. Because when a sound becomes real popular, naturally you want to copy that. For every band that comes out that breaks new ground, you have a bunch of other bands that follow, like, "Hey, it worked for them. Let's do that." Whereas all the bands I've been in have been like, "No, we're not following, formula. We're not following tradition. We're doing our own thing." And sometimes I think that unfortunately, it can work against you, because with some people it can either go over their heads, or it's just not their thing and it falls by the wayside. Yeah. But I mean, to me, it's better than just playing in a band that's a clone of something else.
Yeah, you got to realize too, there's a lot of artists out there that they get comfortable. No matter what they did to get to where they are, they start to get comfortable, and the exploration part just kind of fades a little bit. They start looking for what's worked already to get that next solid.
Yeah, and I can name so many bands like I was having a conversation about this with a friend of mine some time ago. You know, it's like I love Suffocation, a death metal band from New York, but I don't want to listen to 10 different bands that sound like them. You know, I love the Dillinger Escape Plan. I don't want to listen to a bunch of bands that sound like them. You know, I love Cynic. I don't want to hear a bunch of bands that are trying to copy them. Not that there are many. You know, so it's like I always want to listen to the genre front runners.
Sure.
You know, and not the clones, because all the clones are going to do is just take that and only get a surface glimpse, if you will, or just the most not extraneous. What's the word I'm looking for? Just the most basic surface thing, and they're just going to go with that. They don't really go much further than that, and especially in the death metal field, when you got a lot of bands that do the Cookie Monster vocals or suck the mids out of the guitar and just do
Yeah.
I mean, you know, that's all been done so many times before and by better bands. So my thing is, you know, I'm listening to the bands that started that, you know, that were the front runners for that, you know, especially a lot of the Florida bands.
Sure.
So
What came first for you? Were you listening to those things because of those qualities, or were you trying to do that on your own first, or did it kind of happen simultaneously? I mean, and honestly, how do you do both at the same time? Like, it's hard not to find yourself, even by accident, starting to sound like, or having some influence sink into what you're doing, you know, and then you realize, wait a minute, so that's already been done.
Well, it kind of followed. It's interesting because when I first got into metal, this was around '84. For me, it was Priest, Maiden, Motley Crue, Metallica, you know, Ozzy, Dokken, Dio, and which was at the time, you know, was current. It was still fresh. It was cutting edge. You know, then a few years later, when thrash started rearing its ugly head, or a couple years later, then I started hearing thrash and hearing like, oh man, listen to how fast these bands can play. And
Yeah.
and then a few years later, when death metal started coming in, I guess what I'm trying to say is I've always been fascinated by extremes. Like, how fast can you humanly play? How long can you play that fast for? You know, that's always been a thing with me. Like, I can remember hearing Slayer and Creator. I heard Slayer first, Rain and Blood, around '86 or so. Mm-hmm. And I was like, Jesus, man, I thought, you know, Judas Priest and Accept or Metallica were fast. And I heard Rain and Blood, and a while later I heard Creator's Pleasure to Kill. And then a few years later, when I'd heard, like, you know, Death and Morbid Angel and stuff like that, I'm like, my God, just keeps getting so extreme. And I loved it. I'm like, this is great. These guys are pushing themselves, like, to the limits. Like, man, what, you know, let's push it and push it. And I've always been fascinated by that. Mm-hmm. And so pretty much whatever I would write or come up with is just a huge amalgamation of what I've been listening to for like the last almost 4 decades. I mean, you know, I still have LPs. I mean, you know, all these like, you know, which LPs for a lot of people's, although I know vinyl's made somewhat of a comeback.
Yeah.
You know, I've had a lot of these LPs since I was in high school. I mean, I got the first Slayer on vinyl. I got a bunch of Iron Maiden European B-sides. I got the early Megadeth on vinyl, like an Ozzy bootleg on vinyl, like all kinds of, you just, you know, you'd really have to search high and low for, like eBay or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, but I bought this stuff when I had the chance to buy it in a record store called Vans Records in Chalmette, and before that it was Acorn Music, also in Chalmette, and it was the '80s, so they had everything.
Yeah.
You know, they had all that.
Yeah, I remember those days, man. They had warehouse records and tapes out here on Veterans in Metairie, and man, that you could go there and get any tape you could think of, and metal studded leather to boot, like, you know, it was like hanging on the walls, t-shirts, all that stuff. It was the world at the time.
It was, and not only was it like that here, well, Chalmette, I should say, where I was growing up, but there was also the Plaza in Lake Forest. You had Camelot Records. I remember walking in there, and you name it, they had it. All by, you know, Celtic Frost, you know, Destruction, whatever. And I'm looking at all these album covers. I'm like, wow. I'm like, look at this. And, you know, and they had the shirts and everything. They had the mirrors. That was another thing, too. Chalmette, they would have these fairs, and the prizes they give away, depending on what event you did, like trying to pop balloons or whatever. I remember winning a Metallica Master of Puppets mirror and a Motley Crue Shout at the Devil mirror. What was that? Put my phone on. I don't know. Sorry about that. So,
you remember going to the fair? And
going to the fair, and I won a Motley Crue Master of Puppets mirror, and I mean Metallica Master of Puppets mirror, and a Motley Crue Shout at the Devil mirror. I remember winning those, and I was like, I wish I still had them because they'd probably be worth money. I guess I was 15 or 16 at the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened to him. But that was the era for it.